Hello and welcome to Radio Europa. This is episode 12 and I'm your host, William. I'm joined tonight by Laura and Mac, and I just want to give you guys a pointer before we start. To all our listeners, please go and check out episodes 10 and 11. We spoke about Sweden and South Africa. The Sweden one's particularly interesting because the election's this weekend, and we discussed a range of topics surrounding that. Tonight, though, we're going to talk about the story that's gone viral in recent days, the protests in Chemnitz in Germany. Laura, if you want to just give the listeners an overview of what's been going on there.
Yes, certainly. So it started in Sunday in Chemnitz in Germany, and 2 migrants stabbed and killed a German man and seriously injured a couple of other people. And basically protests have been happening since then. So it started off straight away on the Sunday with around 100 people. And then on the Monday, it was up to 1,000 people. And now it is reportedly up to tens of thousands of people. The first couple were supposed to be silent marches, so just in memorial of victims of migrants, really. People were supposed to wear black, and there were giant memorial photos that people were carrying with the faces of people who have been killed by migrants on, including, I don't know if you guys remember Mia, the young girl who was killed over in Germany. The media have obviously jumped on it and they're calling everybody neo-Nazis and far-right. I've got a couple of article headlines. The Guardian published one called "In Chemnitz, Anti-Fascists Stand Up to the Nazi Salutes of Germany's Far-Right." That it's just ridiculous. That's what the media are running with. That's it, really. Brittany Pettibone did a very good video on it if anyone wants to see some footage from the event. She basically just said there's no violence there. It's all like families, old people, children and everything. Just protesting against violence, really, and riots that have happened in Germany and violence towards women. That's it.
Yeah, it's interesting how when a migrant commits a crime, the media's first angle is to say, "Oh, look at these horrible racists standing up against it." But on that point, Mac, I'm going to ask you: do you think that people around the world looking at these headlines, do you think the majority of people will see through the media agenda and recognise that the real problem here is the migrant issue, or do you think people are still taken in by this whole far right thing going on?
I think it's a bit of both. A lot of people will think, "My God, it's mad! It's complete chaos how the German government is going against the German people. When a German gets killed, they get called a racist and Nazi if they try to stand up for themselves. But if a migrant does it, then they get to be the victim all the time." But I also believe there's still a big portion of the people that actually believe the headline, and they'll think they're all Nazis, and they'll still support Angela Merkel's decision back in 2015 to have brought all these refugees into Germany.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the danger, isn't there, that not enough people see through the media haze, and you get this distorted narrative going on. Laura, I know that you've looked into this, and you looked into the numbers. Do you think that what's going on at the moment represents a significant increase in the backlash? Because I know over in Germany, the Pegida marches in East Germany in particular got a fair number of supporters. Do you think this is on a par with that, or do you think it's snowballing and getting bigger, or what?
I definitely think that nationalism is growing across Europe. I mean, in every country really, apart from Britain, it seems. But the AfD were actually polling. Were they polling in second place or something? They're doing really well in Germany, and obviously the Sweden Democrats in Sweden have been polling in between first and place. I know that they're kind of your boomer tier, so it's an improvement at least. So like Max said, I think some people are still kind of asleep, and they will look at these articles and think, "Oh my God, the neo-Nazis." But I do think more and more people are becoming awake and noticing that it's just ordinary people. There was actually, in Brittany's video that I mentioned, there was an older guy at a woman. I think she was supposed to be a journalist, or she might have just been somebody from, the other side who'd gone to counter-protest. And he was saying, like, look, my wife and my kids, they're going for walks and they're getting Muslims coming over to them. And I won't repeat what he said, but being, kind of disgusting and sexual towards them. And he said, if I said that, then I'd be on a sex offender register, but they just get away with it because it's part of their culture. Just normal, kind of everyday people getting fed up of it. And last year, I actually went to a match in Manchester just after the Manchester Arena bombing where 22 people died. And again, it was just normal people. It was just, families there with the children and old people. And I do think that, and I think that the media are trying to play it down. But yeah, I definitely do think that our numbers are growing.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, Germany is a place where it's always difficult because of the past. And so if the numbers are growing in Germany, that tends to be a good litmus test for the whole of Europe, because it means that elsewhere they'll be growing even higher. I know that, I mean, I've seen that video that I think you were alluding to it there with the man who was talking about his wife and daughter. I've seen the video of that guy, and he totally schools this. I don't know if she's a journalist or some randomer, but totally schools her on the problem. And this is a central thing, because it's not as if the politicians don't see these videos and they don't hear these testimonies and these anecdotes, yet they don't seem to want to change course. And Mac, you might want to comment on this, but do you think there's ever a chance in these situations of people like Angela Merkel admitting they've been wrong and trying to rectify the situation, or do you think that they will just double down and keep it up and hope that the people complaining are replaced quicker than they can do something about it?
I definitely don't think she's going to change anything from normal. She even said herself that it was the Germans who were the bad people against this, which is interesting because back in 2010, I think she admitted that multiculturalism itself was a mistake. And then she invites these refugees in. It's a big decision to make, so it's going to be obvious that she's going to hear people saying they're causing mayhem. The AfD will be saying it in Parliament in front of her. And when they did say it in front of her in the Parliament, she just had her nose up and she chose to ignore it and thought she was best. So at this state, I don't think she's going to change anything about it because she lives away from these problems. She's one of the elites. She doesn't need to face it every day, and I doubt the migrants, even if they see her walking alone, I doubt they do anything to her because she's essentially letting them be in the country.
Yeah, I mean, she's Mummy Merkel to these people, isn't she? She's the cash cow that the migrants are dining out on. So yeah, I mean, of course she's going to be
ridiculous. I know.
Yeah, but she's going to be number one in their eyes. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think that these people have any intention of changing course. But that creates problems. Even in the intermediary period between now and another election, when people can make their voices heard a bit better, that it sort of presents an awkward dynamic socially, because you've got on the one hand the migrants. There's a section of the migrants that don't change their ways, and they'll continue these provocations and sexual assaults and other acts of violence. You've got the protesters who will see the politicians doing nothing about it. And of course, I've got to be careful with what I say here, but what I'm essentially getting at is, in my mind, that's a recipe for unrest when you've got two conflicting interests and neither of them will give an inch to the other. So Laura, I mean, I don't want to be alarmist and say, civil war or whatever, but can you just give us your thoughts on that dynamic and whether you think there will be any sort of unrest connected to that in the coming weeks and months?
I think, I'm not sure if there will be in the coming weeks and months, but I definitely think that that's where we're heading in the future, because as we know, we're being demographically replaced in our own countries. So we can either bow down and go out silently, or people are going to fight back. And people need to realise that when the white share of the population drops and the third world percentage increases, then crime is going to increase and the IQ is going to drop and things like that. And it is going to get violent, I think. And I'm not saying that we're going to start it, but I think people are going to defend themselves. Like in South Africa, people are being attacked in South Africa and people are trying to defend themselves. But I think, just back to the points that you two made about Merkel, I think maybe we're giving her a little bit too credit. I don't think she's stupid. I think she knows very well what she's doing, and I think she's doing this on purpose, really. I don't think she's an idiot. I don't think that she would have let in all those people in September 2015 without consulting higher people as well, in a way. And we know over in Britain, when Tony Blair was in power and they completely opened up the floodgates and let a load of people into Britain, in coming years it was admitted that they did that to make Britain multicultural and to rub the right's nose in diversity. So I don't think she's necessarily making mistakes in a way. I think she's kind of doing it on purpose, and I think a lot of left-wing politicians are doing it on purpose.
It's interesting how she's a left-wing politician when she's with a Conservative party. I mean, inverted commas.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, actually, because it is quite accurate to describe her as definitely liberal and quite probably centre-left. But it's like, I know you referenced Britain, and it seems to be, I don't know why it came to my mind, but there's a theme with these people, like your Tony Blairs, Sarkozy, Macron, Merkel, and they follow the same pattern where they import their new voter base or whatever, and then they all seem to go on and win the Charlemagne Prize, that European prize. And I don't know whether it's one of these, throwaway, well done, you've advanced the New World Order things, or whether it's totally insignificant. But, it just came to mind. But
isn't it a prize that you get for advancing cooperation between Europeans or something? That's what it's for, something. It's a Kalergi Prize, isn't it? He won the first one in 1950.
Yeah, ostensibly it's for people who contribute towards, European progress and whatever. But you look at the prize list and it's like the last three are like Macron, Merkel and Tony Blair or something. And it's just a total horror show.
Yeah, a lot of like high kind of European Commission employees and that have won it as well. Has Juncker won it? And I think quite a few of those guys have won it as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not too sure about Juncker, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised.
Let's have I'll do a Google while you're talking.
All right. I think Schultz as well. Check Martin Schultz as well. But so if I bring it back to the topic I mentioned to Laura, if I bring you in on this, Mac, and get your thoughts. So obviously, there's always that thing at the back of everybody's mind, civil unrest, because at the end of the day, when you're faced with a hostile situation, a natural response of any living organism is to organise and defend. And this might be quite a contentious question to ask, and it's the sort of thing Americans normally say, but I'll say it anyway. Do you think there's enough people in Germany, native Germans, who have that motivation and that desire to defend something?
It's a good question. I hear a lot of the protests coming from the east of Germany, but I don't often see it so much in the west. So it's definitely an Eastern German thing. And they're used to not being so multicultural. So when they all come in, they all go against it. And perhaps that's something to do with the fact that they lived under communism, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. It is interesting in East Germany, excuse me, because their voting patterns are different from the rest of Germany as well. They either vote for Die Linke, the left party, or they vote for AfD. They don't tend to vote for Merkel's Conservatives or the Social Democrats so much. Interestingly as well, if you look at a religious map of Germany, the old Federal Republic, the West German side, is all between 70 and 90% Catholic or Protestant, whereas you look at East Germany, and I think it's in some parts it's 99% irreligious, atheist, and in all of East Germany it's at least 90%. I mean, because people often say that Poland, for instance, is so strong against the influx because of their Catholicism, because their religion. Now, East Germany doesn't have that. So, I mean, there is that element that they've lived under communism, but this is a bit of a broad question, but what other factors do you think makes them more prepared to stand up than, say, their counterparts in Bayern or, I don't know, the Rhineland or something?
It's a bit of an interesting question to ask, and you mentioned religion, but I myself, I'm not particularly religious, but I recognise about the demographic replacement because it's just something you see out there when you're in a multicultural area. And in Germany, we have to mention that 40% of under fives are from a migrant background. I don't know if, assume the majority of it is from a non-European background. So I assume they might have seen the newspapers themselves, they might have seen a school where none of the children looked German, so I would have been visually seeing things themselves. And maybe the East Germans have got more rebellious attitude amongst them compared to the Western Germans. I do believe there'll be people in Western Germany who will be thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. That's probably true, and it's probably the case that it's not that the West Germans are of a particularly different temperament, but it's more that the East Germans are reacting differently to what has already been happening to West Germany for quite some time. The other thing, and I'm not sure, I mean, this ties into the wider issue of Europe, but because it might apply elsewhere, but East Germany has always been poorer than West Germany since the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's still considerably poorer. And you find that in the East, obviously in Poland and Hungary, they're not poor, but they're not at the same material level as the West of Europe. And I mean, I'll bring you both in on this, but I don't know what you think about this, that actually they're more prepared to stand up, where the West Germans would, but the West Germans have got more to lose, whereas the East Germans, they don't necessarily fear losing what they don't have materially. And I think that could be, I don't know if you guys agree, but that could be the case in Western Europe, France and Britain, where because there's a high standard of living, people don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to poke anything in case it all falls apart. So, Laura, I don't know what you think about that one.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because when I think about Britain and the people that are kind of anti-immigration and pro-Brexit, it's a working class people, but then the people who have got more to lose seem like just very naive about the fact that they're going to lose it. So yeah, it's a difficult one, and I think if you do look at the voting patterns of Brexit, obviously immigration played a big part in that. It was the North and like the working class council estates where people voted for it, and then you've got your Liberals, your champagne socialists in London who very heavily voted Remain. So
it was also a lot of the older generation as well that voted to leave, even ones that were more richer.
Yeah, and age is a big factor in it as well. Yeah, I actually, just to interrupt, sorry, I did look at the Charlemagne Prize on Wikipedia, and Juncker, he did win it, but also Donald Tusk.
Of course.
Herman Van Rompuy, am I pronouncing that right? He's the guy that Nigel Farage said looked scruffy, isn't he? Martin Schulz, Pope Francis has won it, and obviously Emmanuel Macron won it this year. So yeah, they're all in there. Angela Merkel's in there too. Tony Blair, Bill Clinton.
I wonder if they discuss amongst them also who's going to be the prize winner on this occasion.
They probably nominate them. I mean, that's sounds like a satanic sort of punk rock band lineup, doesn't it? With these weirdos who
Macron was so obviously gonna win this year. He's just like, he's their puppet, isn't he? He's like their little lapdog that just does whatever they ask him to and says whatever they tell him to say, and it was just so obvious that he was going to win it, I think.
The biggest virtuoso, whoever can show it the most.
Yeah, whoever can advance the cause of destroying Europe the best. Well, I mean, it's quite fitting, really, because after all, Charlemagne, his pejorative nickname is the Butcher of Saxons, and Merkel is right now the Butcher of Saxons, because it's Chemnitz is in Saxony, isn't it? So there's a nice symmetry going on there, I think. I think just to sort of wrap this one up, I want to sort of ask both of you, what are your final thoughts on, specifically relating this back to Germany now, what are your final thoughts on how this is going to progress? And what I mean by that is the protests as a street element, but also how do you think it's going to translate into the Landtags, the state parliaments, and as well as the federal election in 4 years' time or whenever it is?
One thing that I do worry about with Germany is I have to be very careful about how I say this, but like the guilt that's kind of dropped on them continuously because of World War II. And I do hear a lot of Germans on social media that are not nationalists are talking about that and saying, you know, it was so awful what happened and we need to make sure that we can't go back there. And they're very careful about what they say as well and the language that they use, and very scared about being called Nazis and stuff like that. And I just worry that is crippling Germany a little bit, and I just think they need to just let that go and not have white guilt. I know that all white people in every country there's groups of white people, isn't there, that have white guilt, but I just think that affects Germany a little bit more than everyone else. What are your thoughts on that? Do you ever see that or hear people talking about it?
I would say it's definitely the case in Germany, especially with the past, but you can even pin it on the UK and say, oh, they must have white guilt as well because of all the slavery. But even then in slavery, it's still going on today in African countries and I think in the Middle East as well. And it was the white people who abolished slavery a few hundred years ago.
Yeah, we get it as well, don't we, because of colonisation in Britain.
Exactly.
Like, whenever we talk about immigration, it's always like, oh, well, you shouldn't have gone and colonised them. And then we have leftists and liberals, and it's normally men that I see doing it on Twitter saying, well, you know, it's our fault because we did this. And it's just like, shut up. Like, grow a pair of balls and be a man and stand up for your country. And I think that, yeah, and I didn't think of that actually when I was talking about Germany, but I think we do have it with slavery and the Germans do have it with World War II. And I just think we all just need to let go of it and just stop apologising for stuff and start protecting our own.
Yeah, I agree with those sentiments as well. And I think, Mac, I want to just get your thoughts on the future in Germany. I'll sort of throw a cat amongst the pigeons here because, so obviously we know AfD have been making gains and done quite well. How do you think, but what about as well the National Democratic Party, who are probably a bit more radical than AfD? How do you think both of those parties are going to fare as a result, or do you think it will all be directed towards advancing AfD?
I've not heard of a National Democratic Party just yet. This is the first time I've heard of it. But in terms of AfD, I do believe they will get more and more votes. But I'd also like to talk about the protests after Chemnitz. I think it's going to quiet down, where you're not going to see much of protests, and then I think there'll be another incident in about 2 or 3 months' time. Also, I'd like to mention there's the Bavarian elections in October, and remember Seehofer in the summer, how he was threatening to tear away the coalition he did with Merkel.
Yeah.
Of course, it didn't happen in the end. I think it was just an act. Just to
maybe.
Votes.
Yeah, it might have been a bit of a pressure thing because, the Bavarian sister party of the CDU tend to be a bit more nationalistic, a bit more right wing, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in Bavaria. Whether the CSU the Seehofer's party, whether they'll consolidate their grip on the parliament, or whether AfD will make any inroads there. Because so far, and I think I might be wrong, but I think this is quite indicative of Catholic parts of Germany. AfD don't tend to fare so well, so it'll be really interesting to see how they do in the Bavarian elections. Before I wrap this up, want to say a couple of things. One, to the listeners, if there's anybody listening from Germany, particularly from the east of Germany, who wants to, maybe come on some time and share their insight on this, it would be interesting to hear from you. But also, I just want to say to you guys, Laura and Mac, I'll go to you, Laura, first. Any final thoughts on the topic, or on the wider situation that you want to share with the listeners?
I just think it's very encouraging that people are starting to get onto the streets and show that they're unhappy with this. I know we've had a couple of protests in Britain as well over the last few months as well. So I just think it's encouraging. I think, always get your information from alternative news sources, because another I'm just going to read this other headline out because it's quite funny. The Guardian wrote an article called "Fearing Chemnitz. I'm used to neo-Nazis, but not my neighbour mixing with them in broad daylight." It's just ridiculous, isn't it? Like, just get your information on these protests from alternative news sites like Defend Europa and other ones, because we will show the honest side of it. But yeah, I just think it's promising, and I just hope to see more of it. And that's it really.
Yeah, I'd echo those sentiments. And what about you, Mac? Any final thoughts for the listeners?
I agree with Laura completely as well. How people are starting to make protests, are starting to be proud of being German and not have the white guilt inside of them, because every race or group of people are guilty of doing something in the past. And hopefully the protests will continue across Europe, and then hopefully more people as well will be listening to this, and then they can wake up and realise all the problems that are going on as well. That'd be great too, because we need more people on our side.
Absolutely, yeah, we need the numbers. So yeah, I think we've covered that topic quite well. And like I said, if anybody's listening from Germany and wants to share their insight, get in touch. Also, like I said at the beginning of the episode, please do go back and check episodes 10 and 11 on the Swedish elections and South Africa, because they're very contemporary topics that we've dissected successfully. And on that note, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye everyone.
Thank you.